She's a wildcat. The Art of Candy is available now. Check out the link in the description to find out more. In this video, we're going to be taking a quick look through Chromaphile and Vernaculis, the first two monographs by Ragnar, aka Brandon Johnson. Another video will feature his other two books, Symptomatica and Aphorismith. Each book is only 80 pages, and I have a typically strict rule about not getting art books under 100 pages. I find they're more of an annoying tease rather than a worthwhile, satisfying experience, so when I break that rule, it means that I think the artist and book are very special, which obviously is the case here. Though I will say what's also a huge factor in making these books feel worth it is that, like, if there were only one of them, I would still feel that usual dissatisfaction, but for you, the reader of today, that there are 4 books available that you can take all together or in any combination you prefer, and so that does amount to a substantial, worthwhile experience and collection of Ragnar's work, and especially because there's no works duplicated across the 4 books, which is awesome. I actually don't have a whole lot to say about the books, which is a good thing, because they're very simple, straight-up art books. They're well done, and there's not really anything you need to be warned about. So they're just the sort of books you can judge purely based on how much you like the art you're seeing, and of course measuring that against the price. But just to give you some information and a little review as we look through each one, so Chromaphile was Ragnar's first monograph, published as a limited edition in 2003. I've never seen the 2003 edition in person, so take this with a grain of salt, but based on my research, it seems there's no difference between the contents of either edition. It's just the covers that are different, although neither of the covers appear in the books nor in any of Ragnar's later books, so the only way to have both these pieces is to own both copies of the book. I would say Chromaphile is my favourite of the 4, but that's based entirely on my personal tastes of which of his works I find most appealing, and so that will vary from person to person, because objectively there's no clear winner as to which is the best book, because they do a few subtle things differently, but the quality and approach is very consistent across all 4 books. But in terms of those small differences, Chromaphile definitely has the worst layout with probably too much blank space, but that's really only compared to the other 3 books, compared to the nonsense layout we see in, I'd say, the majority of art books, including one of Ragnar's other art books, but what we have here is still far better than those, so it's not really a problem. One thing Chromaphile does the best out of the 4 books, however, is its text. Now, there's barely any text at all in these books, and that's perfectly fine. Some people will disagree, but for me, it's not a problem when the text isn't there, but when it is there, it's a nice little bonus, and that's what Chromaphile does really well. It's just very short, light, occasional commentary from Ragnar, just nice little anecdotes, insights, or thoughts that are pretty frank and open. And the commentary is always referring to a specific piece or series, so I really enjoyed the text when it appeared in this one. It's also important to remember that even though this edition of Chromaphile came out in 2005, it's a reprint of a book that came out in 2003, meaning the 2005 edition still only contains works produced up to 2003. And so there's no need to feel mistakenly ripped off or whatever that the second book, Vernaculis, came out only a year later in 2006. With Vernaculis and the subsequent 2 books, the text noticeably drops, both in terms of quantity and quality. Basically just scarce musings or ramblings about nothing rather than actual insight. Again, that's not really a big deal since I'm just here for the art, but it is a difference between the first book and the later 3. My favourite thing about Vernaculis and the third book, Symptomatica, is that these 2 probably have the most poster-style works that Ragnar does a lot of. He's not just an illustrator, but also a designer, and I've noticed how so many designer illustrators, especially those with vintage-inspired sensibilities, love making posters or book covers, whether fake or commissioned, because they obviously represent the best media or style where you get to use all those elements: illustration, design, storytelling, typography, composition, fun taglines, etc. Speaking of Ragnar being a designer, you can certainly observe that in all 4 books in a really light but effective way. Many pages have very simple but welcome and tasteful background design or changes in the page color that complements the works really well. All 4 books also use French wraps for the covers. I think there should be a law that makes it illegal to publish large paperbacks without them, but that these books use them is great. And I've just pointed out 2 incredibly inconsequential things. If these books didn't have those, for all practical purposes, it would not matter at all. Yet I appreciate attention to detail, particularly of the elegant, well-handled variety, and these books do feel like a class act. So be sure to check out part 2, where we'll be taking a look through books 3 and 4 in this Ragnar series.